Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Heather Munn from Premier Media Services, and this conference will be recorded. First speaking will be Kelly Black, President of Premier, and she will be going over the forward-looking statement and the company overview for Itech Medical. Next, we will hear from Wayne Coburn, President and CEO of Itech Medical. And also, Wayne will be answering questions for everyone at the end of the call. So please hold all your questions until then, and then I'll also be muting the line. So when we get to that part of the call, I'll unmute everyone's line so you can speak up and ask your questions. Kelly, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, so this forward-looking statements are always important, even though we all have investment professionals here. I'll just read the standard statement that the conference call may contain forward-looking statements. Such forward-looking statements are subject to a number of risks, assumptions, and uncertainties that could cause the company's actual results to differ materially from those projected in such forward-looking statements. Forward-looking statements speak only as of the date they are made and do not guarantee future performance. We undertake no obligation to publicly update or revise any forward-looking statements. I always love that when you're trying to do a call to tell everybody about a company. So let me just go into just a little bit about Itech, and we'll get Wayne on the phone. So I know everybody's busy out there with all the holiday stuff going on. But yesterday, Itech put out one of their best press releases in the years that they've been public, and that was that they got approved by the Healthcare Canada. And Itech is engaged in the commercial development of healthcare information systems and new technologies. And the company has been focusing on a proprietary platform called muscle pattern recognition. And what that is an analysis for your back pain and neck injuries. And it's mostly being applied in a business setting for the first commercialization with companies that have huge workman's comp issues. You know, back injuries are the number one workman's comp problem. So this helps people diagnose it better, get people back to work easier at a cheaper cost. And with their detailed information that they provide back to the doctors, they're not working with chiropractors. They're actually working with neurologists and general medicine people. This is giving them the tools that the doctors need to help decrease the cost for workman's comp and work-related injuries, along with general back injuries. As we all get older, we all have back injuries. So yesterday's announcement, although we didn't have a slew of people coming into the stock right away, I think it was a significant upside, and it shows that Health Canada is the first persons that actually approved this. And Wayne's going to go into more detail on how it works and what the news from Health Canada actually means, because we will be able to start generating revenue in the Canadian healthcare market. Okay. So Wayne, why don't you go ahead and start?
All right. Well, thanks, Kelly. Actually, you've done a great job. I could just start by in conclusion. I appreciate, first of all, I appreciate you setting up today's call, and I also appreciate everybody taking the time after the market closed to phone in. As Kelly said, we're a healthcare information technology company, and our first product is a medical device called muscle pattern recognition, or MPR. I'll explain what MPR is in a moment. We started in 2003, and since that time, we've been conducting research and clinical development work on the MPR system, but we've been doing it very quietly and privately, even though we've been a public company since 2007. But this year has marked a real turning point for us, and in particular, the past several months have brought us to the point where we're no longer a development stage company, but we're rather a commercial one. Today's phone call is really only the third time we've actually reached out to actively talk about our work, and the start of an active IR program with Kelly also represents a turning point for us. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let me tell you a little bit about Itech Medical and MPR so that you can understand exactly where we are today and the significance of yesterday's announcement. As a company, our mission is to improve people's health through the development and commercialization of innovative, non-invasive healthcare information systems. To carry out our mission, first thing we did was assemble a strong team, including an experienced management team of 6 professionals who collectively have over 150 years of experience in developing and bringing to market medical technologies and devices. The background of these 6 individuals includes R&D, clinical development, regulatory, sales and marketing, operations, finance, partnering, licensing, and M&A. No one person on our team has less than 10 years of experience in the medical technology or the medical device field. As I mentioned a moment ago, our first product is a platform technology because we believe there's other applications called muscle pattern recognition, or MPR. And MPR itself addresses one of the largest markets in global healthcare, and that's neck and back pain. It's been estimated that the annual cost to diagnose and treat back pain in the U.S. is about the same as it is for cancer, roughly 80 to 100 billion a year. In Europe, the number is even higher. In fact, the costs associated with diagnosing and treating neck and back pain have been climbing more than the overall rate of healthcare in the past 5-10 years. In terms of the workers' comp system, Kelly's right. It's the most expensive. 1 out of every $3 spent is on treating back and neck pain. And in the U.S., the workers' comp system covers about 120 million workers, and with about half of them reporting back pain every single year. And what I've just described is the economic impact. The clinical impact is just as great. In terms of physiology, and you'll forgive me, I'm not a physician. This is from a business guy. The neck and back movement is it's the result of an integrated, actually a very highly integrated and coordinated pattern of actions by approximately 14 major muscle groups. And a strain or sprain in any one of these muscles or muscle groups can cause a whole cascade of events that usually winds up resulting in back pain, back or neck pain, and muscle dysfunction. And at this time, physicians have very few tools to assess the patients. A diagnosis, I would suspect that there's 80% of the people on this call have had problems or have problems with back pain. It's that prevalent. And so you'll know that a diagnosis and treatment regimen is usually made up after a review of the patient's history of previous back injuries. The physician will usually ask questions and update the file to see if there's been any events that may have led to a recurrence, and a physical exam as well, just to try to localize the problems. But all of these are subjective assessments. And as a result, accurately diagnosing and treating these types of strain and sprain injuries is usually hit and miss. And that's one of the main reasons that the costs are so high. In about 80% of the cases, the pain is the result of a muscular strain or sprain, and there is no quantitative or objective diagnostic tool that can help the physician determine what the real source of the problem is. So MPR not only gives the medical community for the first time an objective tool to help them in their diagnosis, but it's also a tool that can be used to direct a specific, very focused rehab program, and a tool that can also be used to measure the outcome of the rehab. In other words, find out what the real problem is, treat the patients with the appropriate rehab, get them better quicker, save money to the system. That's what our test can do. As for the test itself, MPR is a non-invasive half-hour test that objectively analyzes the integrated patterns of muscle recruitment. In other words, the engagement of these muscle groups that I described in order to perform specific body movements. It uses known technology to acquire data from each one of the sites, the muscle sites, while the person is in 9 different movements. And these movements are designed to measure and document the muscle recruitment patterns as the patient goes through the movements. The results of the test are then sent to a physician in a 3-page report that gives the doc objective, clinically relevant information on the nature of any possible muscle dysfunctions, including whether the problem is even muscle-related or not. And if it is, it'll tell the location of the problem, the type of injury, whether it's a spasming or whether it's a weakness, and it shows any muscles that may be compensating as a result of the actual injured muscle. At the end of the third quarter this year, we announced that we had completed a 600-patient research study of MPR at the Utah Spine and Joint Institute in Salt Lake City. And we're still going through the data. It's just an mountain of data to go through. But based on our preliminary review, we've seen more than enough to move on to the next step, both clinical and commercial. Now, roughly the same time as finishing the study, we filed for approval of the MPR system in Canada and in Europe. And during the fourth quarter, We responded to questions from both Health Canada and the European Agency. And yesterday, as Kelly said, we announced that we'd received approval from Health Canada to begin sales and marketing of the system. And I am pleased to report that tomorrow morning we'll be issuing a press release announcing that we've just received approval to begin sales and marketing in Europe as well. This is probably, in fact, not probably, this is the most significant news that we've ever had as a corporation. We're currently completing our filing for FDA, and we hope to have it submitted within the next several weeks. FDA, as you're probably aware, always takes longer than other jurisdictions, but the good news is that we're working with FDA. We can begin to sell in these two markets that collectively have a population over 500 million people. Now, if you include the U.S. market, which we expect to have approval on next year, you can add another 300 million people. And while our core market is really represented by the working population, sort of ages 20 to 55, we're still talking about a target population of several hundred million people. Now, in North America, just to give you the scope of the size of our market, in the North American and European markets, there's approximately 320,000 physician offices. And based on our estimates of how many NPR systems it would take to service this number of physician offices, we come up with a number of approximately 80,000 systems. Now, based on an average of around 3 or 4 tests a day, and our tests are capable of doing double that, we come up with a total annual market of about 64 million tests. I'm just giving you a scope of the size of the market. At $40 a test, which is a conservative estimate of what we believe we can charge, you come up with a total annual market of about $6 billion. Now, several months ago, we hired an experienced medical device sales and marketing fellow who's currently working on our rollout plans. And in Europe, our first phase is going to involve the soft launch in strategic countries, including Germany and France. And without going into the specifics of the plan, at least at this time, we're going to be hiring a European-based sales manager to coordinate all our European sales. We'll complete an evaluation of the market. We'll look at the competitive landscape, select some early adopters who can work with us to get the tests seeded in the European market, and identify potential strategic distribution partners for specific regions of Europe, and then start bringing them on board. And once we've established NPR in Europe, we'll initiate the second phase of our sales plans by beefing up the European sales staff and really ramping up our selling through our channel and distribution partners. We're going to be selling through distribution partners. We'll also be working with these distribution partners on setting up local branding and promotional programs for the different regions. Our plans for North America are almost identical to Europe, except we're going to be starting in Canada before U.S. In Canada, we're going to be working with a smaller number of distributors because it's a much smaller market for starters, and it's socialized medicine, and we're really selling primarily into the government. Before we launch in the U.S., we'll be hiring 2 sales executives to carry out our local plans. We'll also be working with key early adopters in various parts of the country, many of whom we're talking to already, so that we've got good geographic exposure of the system. We'll be working with these early adopters not only to establish usage and reimbursement patterns, but also to help us achieve our longer-term reimbursement goals for the NPR system, which is to have it set as the gold standard. Now, if any of you have ever invested in medical device or biotech or pharmaceutical stocks, you know how important reimbursement is. Doesn't matter how good your product is, if the market's not willing to pay for it, you're going to have a lot of problems in getting the product adopted. For us, it's no different, which is why we're devoting a lot of attention to it, and it's one of our top programs for 2011. The good news for us is that the test has been used and paid for in the past. Even better news is that it was reimbursed at a much higher rate than we're basing our forecasts on. And this work, as I said, is well underway. We're currently working with an experienced reimbursement strategy group, to help us with the issue of reimbursement. And as I said, longer term, our goal is to see NPR established as a gold standard in the neck and back muscle function testing. In terms of how we make money, our business model is based on 4 revenue sources: equipment sales, per-use revenue, consumables, and annual license fees. For equipment sales, we want to establish the lowest possible entry point for our systems to encourage wide use of the system. The bulk of our revenue, though, is expected to come through a recurring revenue stream through per-use service fees, annual license fees to a lesser extent, and consumables for the test. To evaluate the revenue potential of our system, we put together a financial model that is similar to a model that's used by manufacturers and purchasers of other medical devices such as MRI and CT scanning equipment. At a projected utilization rate of about 65%, which is about 3 or 4 tests a day, each MPR system is capable of producing between $30,000 and $35,000 per year to us. Now, to put that into perspective, there are about 20 MRI machines per 1 million people of population in the U.S. And MRI equipment is very expensive, as you know, costing them anywhere between $1 million, $1.5 million each. If we were to even come close to that level of penetration, our equipment cost is less than 1% of an MRI machine, we'd be looking at close to $200 million a year in sales alone. We're not naive. We're not forecasting those types of numbers at this point, but it gives you an idea of the revenue potential of our system, and it's very high margin business because it's on a per use basis. It also gives you an idea of the partnering potential for the MPR system. We're currently in discussions with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world for the distribution of MPR in Canada. And we've also started discussions with potential groups in Europe. So this year has been our biggest year yet, and the approval of the MPR system in Canada and Europe is, for us, a great way to end the year. We expect next year to be even bigger as we move into the commercialization stage of the company. As I said at the outset, we've been very quiet up until now because we wanted to focus on the work that would give us the best chance at making it to the market, and we're now there. Our work is now starting to be recognized, and in spite of us being quiet, we've recently been contacted by several of the largest media outlets in the U.S., and I'm talking print and television, to talk about our technology and our company. Even based on our press release yesterday, we were contacted this morning by one of the most recognized and well-respected medical technology journals in Europe to do a piece on us. Now, we've known for some time that there's a strong interest in the medical community in what we're doing, but it's gratifying to know that there's a much broader audience that also wants to learn about our test and about the company. At this point, I would like to, well, why don't I just quick snapshot of the company. We've been a public company since mid-2007. We went public by way of a reverse merger with a blank check company, so there was no history with it. We have been a successful reporting issuer with SEC since that point in time, Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. We have an independent board of directors of experienced people in the medical device and the finance field. There's about 33 million shares outstanding, roughly. We're currently traded on the OTC market, and we are looking to possibly move that to a more senior level market in the first half of next year. And we're also listed on the Frankfurt Exchange. And so I guess at this point, Kelly, why don't I open it up for any questions?
Perfect, Wayne.
Okay, if anyone has a question at this time, everyone should be able to speak now.
Wayne, what is your current cash position?
We currently have about $500,000 in the bank. We signed a financing deal with a European group earlier this year. They will be topping us up within the next short while with another $400,000. They have an option to invest up to another $1 million at 50 cents a share. We're in discussions with them about possibly doing that sooner than later to help give us the balance sheet that we need for a more senior listing. We're currently our burn rate's about $75,000 to $100,000 roughly per month, so we're in an actually pretty good cash position.
Thank you.
How fast, Wayne, you think you can have a very strong distribution system in the European area so that doctors and medical centers can have the possibility to treat their patients with the muscle pattern, with this MRP thing?
Thanks, Devin. To be successful in Europe is really going to be no different than it is to be successful in North America. We have to make sure that the system is seeded, or we start with key, luminary, well-respected accounts where we have an opportunity to, first of all, work out any bugs in the system with regards to communication and billing. But these are also locations that the local governments, local payers are going to look to for support to help support reimbursement. For us, the German market is extremely important and will probably be the first market where we will start. Now, we're a fairly small organization. We can't afford to roll this thing out right across Europe at the same time, and that's not typically the way that it's done. So we'll obviously be selling and marketing in Europe this year. We expect we'll be starting in Germany, France, the Netherlands, and signing up distribution partners in the second half of the year, which will allow us then to start to gain exposure in some other different regions. For example, Italy is one of the largest medical device markets in Europe as well, too.
Okay.
So, this is when a new technology is adopted by the market, it's not immediate. You have typically a hockey stick type of a growth curve. So, but for us, the most important is to get into the best key luminary accounts at the beginning.
Wayne, you mentioned or you stated that yet the Canada and Europe currently. Have you formulated a program in the Asian market, and how far down the road would that be?
That's a good question. The CE mark that we received, or that we're announcing tomorrow morning, is going to help us in those markets as well too. And the Asian market is obviously an important market in terms of size. We've got discussions going on right now in South Korea and Australia. Again, we have to be very careful that we don't spread ourselves out too thin. We're talking to a potential distribution partner for the region. But for us, it's most important to get ourselves established in North America and Europe first. So I would think that we'll have at least something started in Asia by the end of the year, and it may be in the form of a local small clinical trial and possibly a distribution agreement. But in terms of sort of giving it any kind of a real push, that would be in 2012, once we're comfortable in North America and Europe.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Wayne, how does it? Can you give us the blueprint of how it's going to roll out in Canada now? I mean, in the next 3 to 6 months, what is the, I guess, the step-by-step of how it's going to work, and how do you derive your revenue, I guess, from this rollout?
Well, globally speaking, there's probably two markets in Canada. You've got the private and the public market. The public market in Canada will come in after the private market. So we will initially target the private market, which will include rehab centers, to an extent the chiropractic market. There are a series of privately owned back clinics right across Canada. There are chains. We're already in discussion with the largest one. We'll establish ourselves in Canada within these private pay markets because it's really the low-hanging fruit for us to allow us to start generating revenue. And it will also give us the reimbursement data that we need to support our reimbursement at the government pay level. And within the government pay, you've got the provincial healthcare systems, and you've also got the workers' comp system as well, too. To be honest, I'm not the guy that's going to give you the detail perhaps that you want of how we're doing that. We're just about to hire a Canadian sales manager. This is a fellow that's been in the medical device sales business in Canada for over 25 years. He's going to be putting together the detailed plans that are going to allow us to roll it out first in the private market, but then the public. But private first, then public.
And the breakdown of the machine, how much will the machines be good profit center for you, or are you just going to get them out there so you can get the test going?
We'll have reasonable margins on them, but for us, it's more important. The margins are much higher having on the per use basis, and so for us, it's much more profitable to have the systems out there and just generating these tests. So right now, our current cost of the system is about $10,000, and we're working with some outside manufacturers. We believe we can bring that cost down to less than half that amount. So we'll have, normal 10-15% margins on the equipment to cover our costs. There'll be service fees involved as well too. But the real revenue potential for us is on the analysis of the data.
Reports, yeah.
It's almost like a software license each time a test is done. And the way the system works is that a patient will go through the test. The data is uploaded to our server where it's processed by our proprietary analysis system, which is patent protected, and then the results are sent back to the physician. That's a $40 click for us. And we will make a lot more money on that than we will on selling the hardware. But there will be reasonable margins on the hardware out there.
And one last question, as you've been working on this for a long time, so I assume you've had an audience of maybe corporations or insurance companies, even up in Canada. Maybe I think that's how it works. Now that you've gotten approval, will that you expect to start seeing some major, discussions coming in? Big corporations who want to use it for their own in-house, monitoring of like a workman's comp type thing.
I would see that us having a bigger impact in the U.S. market because that's where most of our experience has been. There was about 50 or 60 large organizations in the past. These are Fortune 500 companies, including some insurance companies, some workers' comp, some HMO, that have used the system in the past on a beta marketing program that we're reimbursing the company for the test. And we've been in discussions with dozen of those on an ongoing basis, and they've agreed to start using the system once it's approved in the U.S., perhaps even before then. In Canada, I think our greatest impact is going to be through establishing the test in some of these national back pain centers. I think that's really where we're going to start to get some major acceptance. Also, I think in terms of profile and credibility, if we're successful in concluding the discussions with this large potential partner, I think that's really going to put us on the map as well too. But I think that your question about major corporations, the impact is really more in the States. And an example of one of those corporations is the Disney Corporation. They used it quite a bit in the past, as did a number of other organizations. And the feedback that we got from them was that they would be prepared to use it across the system, only if the company did two things. One is provide independent clinical trial results, which we'll be doing, and the second is more pragmatic pricing, which we are also doing. So I think that major impact is going to be felt in the U.S.
Well, you said they'd be using it like in-house. Would they be sending someone to specialized doctors, outside the office, of course, to look at their back issues or neck issues? Or would that be something they would actually do? Do they have clinics within their organization?
Some actually have clinics within their own organization. For example, a company called Schneider Trucking. They've actually got their own clinics. A lot of these large self-insured corporations also have clinics, but clearly not enough to support what we're looking at. Most of them would have relationships with outside clinics where they're sent for whether it's blood test work or X-ray work or even our kind of test, even rehab programs. So we would expect that most of them would be through these outside organizations that already have existing relationships with these large corporations, but some of them will definitely have their own.
With just to interject for a second, with healthcare changing here in the U.S., people like Intel, Disney, Walmart, Walgreens, all of them have in-house clinics now that they treat their workman's comp issues with. Or even like Intel now has a clinic where there are people that are living out of the country go and get their shots. If you have an ear infection, you go there so you don't have to leave work, and they know what the doctor's excuse is. So more and more as larger employers are becoming self-insured, they actually are doing the treatment. They have hired doctors and nurses that actually work for, like Intel Corporation has a huge medical clinic, and Motorola also has one. So that's where I think that's a huge market that we're not looking at, along with the doctors, the neurosurgeons, and Wayne could have brought this out a long time ago if he wanted to go into just chiropractors. I think they'll be able to sell machines into that area, but I think you have a lot more credibility and a lot more value for the insurance reimbursement by going into the mainstream neurosurgeons, back doctors, and workman's comp areas.
Well, you raise a good point. The chiropractic market will always be there for us, but we know through experience that if you start at the chiropractic market and try to work your way up into the major medical market, you're going to run into a lot of resistance, and that's just based on historical tendencies within that market, if you will. The tendency of chiropractors to overcharge and overuse new technology. So what we've done from the very beginning is that we've targeted the major medical market, including the payers, and knowing full well that the chiropractic market would always be there for us anyway. In fact, one of the members of our medical advisory board is one of a handful of people in the U.S. that's not only a doctor of chiropractic medicine, but he's also an MD as well too. So we straddle both worlds. We have an understanding of both worlds, but really we're focusing on the major medical market. And as far as those large corporations, for us, those are the early revenue opportunities because they don't require a separate reimbursement code. These are companies that are self-insured, that they dictate what health care they're going to use and to pay for. And by getting ourselves seated with these large self-insured corporations, not only does it allow us to start generating revenue right away, but it gives us the reimbursement data that we're eventually going to need when we go and apply for our own CPT or our own reimbursement code with the government.
Are there any other questions? I think we covered a lot of it. The company won't be out there looking for financing because we are funded, and with bringing out the commercialization, we'll be able to move forward with cash flow for next year. So at that point, right now we look at the stock as a good opportunity for everybody to come in at this point and then work with us as we bring this out through, commercialization in Canada, Europe, and then with our U.S. approval.
Great. Well, if there's any other questions, you can either direct them to directly to Kelly or contact me directly. My email address is on our website, and I'll be happy to get back to you with any information you're looking for.